Hardly any other era keeps researchers as busy as the era of the ancient Egyptians. No wonder, after all, the inhabitants of the pharaonic empire are still accompanied by huge question marks and some almost unbelievable theories. The unique finds that we are about to present to you do their best to shed a little more light on the past. For example, did you know that we have misunderstood the true purpose of mummification for generations? That experts have discovered the pyramid of an ancient Egyptian queen who was not mentioned in any records, and that there are actually artifacts that can bring the gruesome mummies back to life. Because no matter how well preserved a mummy may be, you can actually tell that the preserved bodies have been around for a millennia or two. To find out what the buried really looked like during their lifetime, it is therefore worth taking a look at the unique mummy or phaeum portraits, which breathe new life into the deceased in a colorful way. In detail, this art of the dead probably emerged in the late 1st century before or early 1st century after Christ, when Egypt was under Roman rule. It is undisputed that the 900 or so specimens discovered so far open a breathtaking window to days long past. However, it is also undisputed that archaeologists have not been able to bring a new mummy portrait to light for 50 years. But fortunately, this is finally a thing of the past. On December 1, 2022, experts proudly announced that they had found a series of mummies buried in a cemetery in the ancient city of Philadelphia with amazingly lifelike portraits of the deceased. The morbid picture gallery is made up of 2 complete portraits and several half-finished ones, which also indicate the high social status of the people depicted. After all, the production of these special works of art was anything but cheap, and researchers assume that they were painted by specialized artists who probably came from Alexandria. The bottom line, however, is that the new finds only represent a fraction of the original collection of portraits. The cemetery was actually looted by grave robbers in the 1880s, with the result that the paintings were subsequently sold on and are now scattered in museums and private collections all over the world. The tomb of the god of fun. A little fun is a must, and the ancient Egyptian gods also knew how to have a good time. To this end, they were entertained by bees, the god of whimsy and fun, who danced merrily and played lively melodies on the harp, lyre, or tambourine. In addition, the god of fun was also considered the protector of pregnant women and newborn babies, and he even made it into an ancient burial complex. A few years ago, archaeologists uncovered a 3,300-year-old tomb in the north of the ancient city of Akhenaten, which contained a number of sparkling pieces of pure gold jewelry. Akhenaten, however, was a short-lived capital of ancient Egypt, founded by Akhenaten around 1350 BC. He had renounced the old deities and instead placed the sun god Aton at the center of worship. A drastic religious upheaval, but one that was to be reversed by Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun. But back to the exciting grave discovery. The burial objects mentioned also included 3 rings, one of which was adorned with the image of the divine entertainer. Depictions of bees was actually quite widespread in ancient Egypt, but unfortunately the same cannot be said of the hieroglyphic inscription on another ring. It reads, Sat I plant Tawi, which means mistress of the earth. But the experts have no idea who it could be. The same also applies to the person who was laid to rest here. Have we misinterpreted mummification? You really don't need to be a trained Egyptologist to know that mummification was used to preserve the body of the deceased. After all, you don't need a degree to make a huge mistake. In fact, what has been a cornerstone of historical research for decades is now being seriously undermined by new findings. In truth, according to the new assumption, mummification was not a means of body preservation for the ancient Egyptians, but a way to lead the dead to divinity. In this regard, experts point out that our theories are still based on the ideas of Victorian researchers who mistakenly equated the ancient corpses with fish. But what do they mean? Well, in the same way that fish are preserved for later consumption, the ancient Egyptians also used salt to prepare their dead for the journey to the afterlife. However, the salty substance used by the pharaohs was drastically different from the salt used to preserve the day's catch. The mineral in question, which occurred naturally in lakes near the Nile, was also applied to the temple statues of the gods, and according to experts, it was used for spiritual purification. Another component that is often associated with mummies is incense. This was also considered an appropriate gift for the gods at the time, and it was called senejer by the Egyptians, which means nothing other than to make divine. However, researchers of the Victorian era were famously convinced that the Egyptians believed that they needed their bodies in the afterlife, an assumption that provided fertile ground for the conservation fallacy. But the new approach is based on the fact that the removal of the internal organs did not have a purely practical meaning, but a much deeper one. It could have been about turning the body into a kind of divine statue to complete the transformation of the deceased person. Probably the oldest antlers in the world. What today is usually decried as an embarrassing youthful sin actually looks back on thousands of years of history. In fact, researchers at the site of Deir el-Medina have recorded a number of unexpected discoveries that prove that Egyptian women already had a strained penchant for Cossack tattoos 3,000 years ago. Unlike their later counterparts, however, these were not merely skin adornments, but spiritual symbols that were intended to protect their wearers in various ways. And while the experts recovered the remains of 6 tattooed women, one of them had a symmetrical pattern engraved on her lower back, accompanied by a depiction of the god Beis and a bowl. As mentioned, he was also considered the protector of pregnant women, and the motif immortalized on the skin was probably related to the ritual cleansing in the weeks following the birth. Another tattoo was made by a middle-aged woman. Its reconstruction revealed that we are dealing here with an unjat, that is, the eye of Horus, and again with bees, this time wearing a feathered crown. In detail, this tattoo may have also had something to do with protection and healing, and the zigzag line pattern could represent a swamp, which in ancient medical texts represented the cooling water used to relieve menstrual or childbirth pains. The enigmatic Shrine of the Falcon. The reason why the 1,700-year-old building that archaeologists unearthed in ancient Egyptian Berenice is known as the Falcon Shrine is quickly explained. After all, it contained the mortal remains of 15 headless falcons. In another room of the shrine, however, the researchers were confronted with a Greek inscription stating that it was inappropriate to cook a head here. However, why the birds were made a head shorter in the first place is just as unclear as the question of what the 2 unknown gods immortalized on a stone monument are all about. However, experts generally assume that the falcons were beheaded in order to make a sacrifice to the gods of the sanctuary. This is an obvious conclusion, as one of the unknown deities himself wears a falcon's head on his shoulders. The second divine mystery again takes the form of a goddess whose head is adorned with a crown of cow horns and a sun disk. What are these strange mummy tongues all about? Talk is silver, silence is gold. However, it is probably quite difficult to get a straight sentence out when your tongue is actually made of pure gold. Despite this, the gold tongues that were placed in the mouths of the mummies in a cemetery near Cuisna were supposed to help the deceased speak to the gods in the afterlife. This strange practice was actually quite widespread during the Greco-Roman period, and golden eyes were sometimes even placed on the mummies to give them insight into the afterlife. In addition to mystical gold tongues, the archaeologists also discovered many other precious artifacts in the graves, including necklaces, ceramic objects, and golden jewelry in the form of lotus flowers and scarab beetles. The Pyramid of the Unknown Queen. The legendary ancient Egyptian necropolis of Saqqara is always good for a surprise. But on closer inspection, many a surprise also turns out to be a tantalizing historical puzzle. But first things first. In 2022, the team of archaeologists led by Zahi Hawass discovered no fewer than 300 hidden burial sites near the Teti Pyramid, which were connected to each other via shafts. And as if the discovery of the individually decorated coffins and grave goods contained in them wasn't breathtaking enough, the mummies were also in exceptionally good condition. But that wasn't all. During the excavation, the researchers also found a pyramid dedicated to a queen that no Egyptologist had ever heard of before. At least the experts managed to find out the name of the ruler. She was known as Neith, but does not appear in any other known records. What is known to appear under our videos, however, is a subscribe button. Press the thumb and subscribe now and never miss an exciting video from us again.